Welcome to TCN Talks. The goal of our podcast is to provide concise and relevant information for busy hospice and palliative care leaders and staff. We understand your busy schedules and believe that brevity signals respect. And now, here's our host, Chris Como.
Hello and welcome to TCN Talks. Our guest today is a good friend, Jack Neal. Dr. Jack Neal is the CEO of HANK.AI. Welcome, Jack.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here and great to be back. Hopefully I don't repeat too much.
No, I had a couple people say last time, I listened to that one 3 times and kept picking up pearls. So Jack's like that. That's why I take him to dinner. So Jack, first, what does our audience need to know about you?
That my mom thinks I'm special. That's probably key. Number one. But no, I'm, I was a computer science programming since I can remember. And thanks to the dot-com bubble, I went to medical school because I couldn't get a job doing software. So in the end, I'm a pediatric anesthesiologist and a software developer, and started an AI company with the goal of really curing healthcare of some of its biggest issues that end up showing up as burnout. It's kind of, is how I got started and what I'm focused on.
Well, it's a little bit more about HANK.AI.
Yeah, so we sit in the revenue cycle, so in how, basically how providers get paid, for providing care. We sit in that space. A big part of that is for anything in AI, you need data. So the honeypot and the holy grail of data is medical records combined with billing information. So, because that's how everything gets incentivized. So anything you're trying to do there needs those 2 data sources. So we sit in that space and provide value to the revenue cycle customers that we service, lowering their costs of labor for handling documents, creating claims, all that stuff. But really, in the end, building models off of that start to incentivize value and de-incentivize over-documentation is really the point. That's why I do it.
Well, I started with you last year with this question, but I haven't asked it in a while, but it's such a fascinating answer. So what are you reading these days?
A couple, I'd say. Not as much AI reading at the moment. It's more kind of because I run a company now, so I realized my biggest weakness wasn't my knowledge of AI. It was my knowledge of people and management stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I think Radical Candor was one of my favorite books. Book by Kim Scott, and it's about how to deliver direct feedback without, insulting someone. And it just so reminded me of my high school football coach who could spit in your face and you still loved him and you do whatever, he made you feel better and you're bigger than yourself. And so just to put the value on creating that relationship with the person is one of the critical ways to be able to give feedback. Otherwise it feels, personal. It feels like an attack. But once they know you care, then you're able to provide. When I say, hey, the work you did on this project was no good at all, you don't take it as Jack's mean, he's a turd, he's a terrible boss. You take it, man, I must have done a bad job and be able to do better. Thanks for telling me. I don't have to sugarcoat it. So I don't know, putting a process around how to get to that point at scale with your direct reports, I found to be, just very helpful and enlightening, and made a lot of sense over the people that I look at in my life who I found to be the most influential and, the ones who could do that to me, who did that to me, so.
Well, you're making me smile, Jack, because, the artificial intelligence, quite often when I talk to you, it kind of blows my brain, and I realize that I've got so much to learn in that area. But you're giving me hope, because what you just talked about is my passion, which is the whole aspect of leadership and working with people. And it's as much art as it is science. So always know I could continue to be a good resource for you on that one, as you're a great resource for me in AI.
Well, definitely. And one more that's in your wheelhouse there's the book Getting More, right? It's an older book by Stuart Diamond, but I never even read the whole book. I really read just the first few chapters, which was all I needed. But it's about deal making, and I think one of the points in there, kind of my takeaway from the whole thing, was really that the best deal makers in the world are toddlers, right? Because they never negotiate from a position of power. Right? They're always negotiating from a, trade like for like type of mentality. So they want the cookie out of the cookie jar. They can't say, I'm going to punch you if you don't give it to me. They have to figure out that a hug or an I love you or I pick something up. They figure out how to negotiate without power. And I think we lose that as we get older. We just start to lose that. And as we get into positions of power, we start negotiating from such, and it kind of sucks. So anyhow, I love that about the book, is to remind yourself that when you're around toddlers, watch them, right? Like just watch how they negotiate and try to be more like them.
Interesting. Have you ever read the book Never Split the Difference?
No, I haven't. Let me write it
It's
down.
actually by, yeah, it's actually by an FBI hostage negotiator, and then takes what you're talking about at a whole different level. In fact, I was just thinking I need to use it, listen to it in my Blinkist coming up here. Well, let's segue to artificial intelligence. So let's talk AI. Man, things have changed since we talked last year. So where are you seeing the application of AI or machine learning in healthcare accelerate?
You're seeing it, definitely in the revenue cycle. It's kind of the lowest hanging fruit to some degree because there's slightly less regulations in that space up until the claim is created. Like all the stuff in the middle, there's no patient involvement. It's not decision making. So you're seeing a lot there. You're seeing actually the technology starting to work versus just say they work. You're seeing some now coming into clinical decision support. You're seeing ultrasounds that use computer vision to kind of tell you what's on your screen. Just whether it's helpful or not, we'll see. But you're seeing a lot of the computer vision applications into radiology and radiology type spaces. I think that's the most that you're seeing in the wild at the moment. There's a ton of work around precision medicine, but that's still got a genomic issue where people don't have their genomes mapped typically. So like, and the data around it is sketched. So when patients come in and show me like, hey, my genome says you shouldn't use propofol, I'm like, okay, great. Every other choice is way worse, but I'll follow your recommendation from your beta tested precision medicine system. But so some of that I find, is more marketing than actual, you know, performance. I think it can mess things up before it makes it better. So, but lots of computer vision.
Thank you to our TCN Talks sponsor, Delta Care RX. Delta Care RX is also the title sponsor for our May and November 2023 Leadership Immersion courses. Delta Care RX is primarily known as a national hospice, PBM, and prescription mail order company. Delta Care RX is a premier vendor of TCN and provides not only pharmaceutical care, but also niche software innovations that save their customers time, stress, and money. Thank you, Delta Care RX, for all the great work you do in end-of-life and serious illness care.
But it feels like things have gotten accelerated. And did you kind of foresee that ChatGPT and all of its different cousins and brothers and sisters were going to be that accelerant? Or what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, it's language, right? That's just language. It's kind of one of the books I recommended last time, which was the Most Human, was around that language type of thing. And so language is just a part of what we do, right? And so just learning our language doesn't mean you learn what we think or know what we know, but it is part of it. And so I think those large language models, they have their place and they're going to be massively and fundamentally change a lot of work that happens. But again, they're just language models. And so, my hope, if you kind of take something that Microsoft just released, which was called DAX, it's the Dragon Ambient Experience. Basically, it sits in the corner of a room with a provider and listens and then writes a clinical note from the interaction. People have been working on it for a long time, but I assume now, because that one's powered by GPT-4 and Nuance, that it probably works. I haven't seen it, but I imagine it works. Well, if you can do that, and then you can combine that with like what we do, which is take notes and make claims, you can kind of get to this touchless care provision, right? Which means I can take care of patients without clicking buttons. I think that's coming in hot. Like that's the part that, again, I'm biased because that's where we're focused is kind of part of that space, but I think that's really why we picked that, to be honest. So I think my bias is actually our strategy, but I think that's where you're going to see a ton of it is around that. The large language models and how you apply them into provision of care. That's the hot spot.
Or is your approach for HANK.AI, has it changed at all with some of the advent of what's happened over this past year with ChatGPT, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, when I first tested GPT-3, which was forever ago, like November, I don't know, something like that. When I first tested that, I immediately called up our CTO and says, all right, finally, like this actually works, right? People have been building things like this. This one actually works. They've actually cracked the nut on this. This is a huge step. This is like, when the internet came around, it's a big step forward. How can we use it, right? We got to somehow build on top of this or, everyone else is gonna. So what can we do with it? Where should we embed it? And so now with the GPT-4 that came out, the improvements are nuanceical, right? You have to be looking at something specific to see the difference. But for us, we're actually changing the bottom layer of our auto coding stack to utilize it for language embedding. So historically, we were building our own things, right? Which is a bit of overhead, and will never beat them, with their funding and their focus. So use that. It's priced at a place that's not expensive per se, which actually makes it worthwhile. You can use it in your business as part of your tech stack. So we've changed the base layer, or we're changing. Technically, we've changed it as of last week, but the base layer of our auto coding stack to actually use that.
Interesting. When you and I were kind of doing pre-show, you were talking about the acceleration. In fact, we'll steal our punchline at the end, because it's going to be the quote we end with, but it's a Lenin quote. And you said that there are decades when nothing happens, and then there's weeks where decades happen. How does that apply to what's going on right now?
It's just really that, like, in my lifetime, I'm 39 years old, so I'm semi-old. I don't know. I'm in the middle, I suppose. But I've been around since the first .com bubble and other things, and I feel like the internet was a revolution, and we all look back, and it's changed some things horribly. I think a lot of like psychological things around social media that it introduced, we haven't figured out how to evolve to yet. But still, those things were. But the speed at knowledge transfer, your ability to find out it's propaganda, or your ability to fact check or learn or whenever or anything you want. It's not that every 5 years you buy an encyclopedia. You can learn everything. Like that fundamentally changed humanity in a massive way. I think that if you use things like GPT just for specific use cases, it's not magic, but the things it does are such a giant augmentation of, like, I'm just a product guy. I just write software and I know some healthcare. I take care of patients, but like I don't know marketing. I don't know how to frame feedback to somebody. I don't know how to like write an investor update that sounds like a publicly traded company. I don't know how to write legal contracts or anything. But you know what? Without hiring all those people, I can do a pretty dang good job at that by utilizing something that's seen a lot of them and can write it in a template. And so it allows me to be more than myself in a lot of realms where I'm not very good. So I think that ability is going to scale people into areas, for better or worse. It means also I'll probably write contracts that a lawyer would say that's shit. Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss on this, but that's crap. But still, it depends on your purpose. I think it allows us to scale ourselves into spaces that we're poor at.
Interesting. Well, Jack, you're such a great visionary. What are some mind-blowing examples over the next 5 to 7 years that we're going to see AI, machine learning, and specifically in healthcare? But if you want to take it outside of healthcare, that's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, I think one, and we'll see if everything happens slower than I think. I'm always wrong on cost and wrong on time, so just take those into context. But I think you'll see this sort of doctor of the future being more like the doctor of the past than the doctor of today. I think, or provider, you can use different terms if it's NP or PA or whatever. But the people that are patient facing, I think the reduction in button clicks is going to be, it might feel slow, but I think we're at the precipice of turning the corner where every update to an EMR is going to start having less button clicks, right? And it's not going to be overnight, but slowly you're going to reach a point where these technologies are coming together to make, eye contact come back into healthcare, to make empathy and not volume come back into healthcare. And it'll be a slow change. You might not notice it, and it happens. It's just like you didn't notice eye contact left until all of a sudden you realize it did. I think it'll come back slowly. That's what I hope. Maybe I'm optimistic here, but I do hope, and I do think, some of what we're doing, but also things other people are doing that fill out that space will bring that eye contact back. So that's number one. Number two is going to be stuff around precision medicine, but there's so many nuances here. We'll see how this lines up. A lot of precision medicine right now is being built by people who are focused on, areas under the curve and statistical relevance, and not actually this is good for a patient. I think it's the problem when you have a lot of really smart developers or tech folks using data to create data outcomes. That data doesn't necessarily, replicate, or it's not really good at bench to bedside. So I'm less convinced that you're going to see a massive improvement in the clinical decision support tools. That's part of why we didn't go
Hmm.
there as a as a company to start with. I just think that you're more likely to cause them to make poorer decisions by making them feel the legal obligation to follow some suggestion rather than follow their own experience and knowledge. So I'm less convinced clinical decision support will get us there. And I'm not convinced that 5 to 7 years we're going to see anything really impactful around precision medicine. But we will start seeing social determinants of health feed in, the stuff that like your provider can't look at. There's too much data. You're going to find ways that it sort of gives some type of score on, you know, this person has terrible habits outside of, you know, the setting. You'll start seeing some of that other data coming in from Apple Watches and other things. How it's implemented into our care, most people are looking at doing it at some type of scoring system that's like green to red or something. And as a provider, I'm not sure what I would do with that. So again, I'm not very convinced of that one either. And lastly, I mean, one quick one here. Nothing I do is quick, but the last one would be that I think you're going to see a lot of patient-facing things, for better or worse, and patients will start self-diagnosing more than they're even doing now, right? Because you'll have conversational abilities to say, "I'm sneezing. What should I do?" And it asks you 4 more questions, and they're going to be adapting to how you're talking to it. And then in the end, it's going to say it's probably one of these 4 things. Go see your doctor. So I don't know. I mean, or they'll try to somehow like prescribe. So that could come in. I mean, that's exciting to think about if it actually were to work and it could be validated. I just feel like that's another one where the validation will come much, much later than the actual product. So you'll have this scary time where the product is available, no validation behind it. It's like going to a random person who says they know healthcare stuff, but they don't have any real credentials and have taken no tests.
So just listening to you, it just was striking me as the art versus science of healthcare. Is healthcare one of the toughest places to apply artificial intelligence first? Like, do you foresee there are other industries that's going to make a greater impact before us?
Well, I can't super speak to the other industry side because I focus so much on healthcare, but I do
Hmm.
think healthcare is always it's the one where the most, startups go to die compared to other spaces. I mean, it's because it's not just does it work, there's so much regulation around it. There's so much, when you judge AI or anything automation, let's use the word AI, it's automation. When you're building automation, one of the key things, and I wish I'd have known this earlier in life, but that I've learned is you have to look at it and say, is this automation going to be judged? Like, what is success? Is success human level equivalence, or is it perfection?
Hmm.
And there's a difference because humans aren't
Hmm.
perfect. So, like, if success is as good as a human, like for analytics and stuff like that, that's normally fine. But like for self-driving cars, it's not fine. You need perfection because we know people run over stuff and cause wrecks, and we're kind of okay with that. But we're not okay if a car does it by itself ever, right?
Right.
So you're kind of going up against the perfection side. And in healthcare, I think that that becomes this sort of augmentation versus automation. So you're either building tools to help a provider so we can still blame a provider, which then makes the provider unhappy because now I've got more stuff that's making me legally responsible. So I think that's part of what makes it really hard. And the other part of that is, healthcare is a right, not a privilege. So you've also got this that whatever
Hmm.
you do to some degree has to be accessible to all. Or you're going to get, Elizabeth Warren's going to beat you down. There's going to be politicians and people who beat you down for providing things that the masses can't have. So you also have to make sure whatever you're doing, isn't biased,
Hmm.
wasn't just trained on Palo Alto patients, right? Like whatever. So you
Hmm.
have all those things make it a
Yep.
lot harder, and it makes it a much longer game. But it should be because you can't move fast and break things in healthcare. And that's how you kill people. So, I mean, you do have to
Yep.
validate um, and go slow.
Well, let me take a little bit different tack. That was recently. I went back and I took my own medicine. I've quoted many times Jim Collins' Good to Great. The chapter on technology as an accelerator. I At some point, I need to write a blog about it because I think it's the lost chapter. Whenever Collins did this was during the dot-com bubble. And so if you remember what he did, Jack, he went and did this huge data analysis. He had an army of MBAs, and they looked for those organizations that kind of separated from the pack, and they went and dissected those organizations. And he said, there's any assumption I would have had going in, it would have been some whiz-bang technology is what differentiated those companies. He said it wasn't the case. What was the case is they understood what they did so well, and they applied technology as an accelerator. And what hits me is that we don't look at technology that way in healthcare. Oh, we're going to buy this EMR and it's going to solve all of our problems. That's the exact opposite of what he described. What he described is we understand these are our processes, so we're going to go choose this technology and it's going to take what we're doing and it's going to accelerate it to the next level. Whereas what happens in healthcare is they buy an EMR or we buy an EMR. And like I literally heard a CEO say this, I had no idea it was going to change all of our processes. And I'm sitting there going, what do you mean? Of course it's going to change all of your processes because of the way you went about it. Whereas we choose, or at least what Collins was saying is these organizations that went from good to great understood this is our process. We're now going to apply technology and it's going to enhance and further it, as opposed to here's what you're doing. Oh, that got thrown out of the window and here's this new thing. And then you're really pissed off. It's a totally different paradigm than how I think most people in healthcare. So given that framing, do you think maybe there's some practical areas where technology could and should be being applied, and maybe people are, I don't want to say missing it, but maybe they're not thinking of it?
Yeah, it's a complicated question. I'll start with like one thing, even in our it's personal to me because one of our three uniqueness through the EOS process, one of them is disrupt without disruption, and that's sort of coming at that point, right? Which is do your best to not just uproot workflows that don't have to be to migrate the process. So again, it doesn't always mean that's possible, but it's just something to keep in mind. Don't intentionally try to disrupt the workflow, right? So that, but I mean, I think, with your mention of the EMR, our biggest issue is that the EMRs, like what problems did the EMRs come to solve? Was it that, our providers are slow, let's give them an EMR, they'll be faster? That wasn't it. Was it that, our patients are getting terrible care, let's put in an EMR, they'll be better? Well, that wasn't it, right? They came to be because it was I think it was Obama's, one of those during his time, I'm not blaming Obama, I'm just saying it was during his time in office, that was, it was meaningful use under one of the, I can't remember which act that was, but it was a meaningful use provision, which was basically we wanted healthcare to be documented in a system where we could get to the data. And it was really for billing. But still, we wanted everything to be data, not paper, not locked up, which sounds great. And we've had this march towards data forever. The problem was we just turned all of the forward-facing, patient-facing providers into data entry clerks. And that's crappy. Clearly, in hindsight, that's really crappy. But at the time, I don't know if it was that clearly wasn't the intent. But that is absolutely what has happened. I mean, find a nurse who's not clicking buttons the majority of their day, right? I mean, you won't. I mean, that's what they do now. Half of their time is button clicking. So, and as a provider, as an anesthesia provider, I'd say 80% of my day is button clicking, maybe more, right? I'd say 80% probably. So you've ended up creating a system that we're all just kind of slaves to button clicking in healthcare, and the patients are just, we're just data collecting from them. So that's the thing that's sitting in our face. That's just like, what the hell? Like, why did this happen? Like, how did this happen? And so while technology is what caused the problem, hopefully, and I think we are now finally at the point where technology is coming to fix the problem. But it's deeper than just making an EMR with less button clicks. It is actually all embedded in regulations, and we keep adding, MIPS and MACRA, right? Trying to do quality measurements, added more clicks. Regulation has led to it, but CMS did put out they had an initiative, 2 years ago, right before COVID, they put out something not paperwork. What is it? Patients Not Paperwork initiative or something. And it's beautiful on paper, but nothing's actually happened. But I think the tech that's coming, the stuff that Microsoft did, the stuff that we're doing, I think there's a lot coming around now that's really focused on the burnout. Not because anyone cares about burnout. I mean, the CFO doesn't care about burnout unless people are quitting, but people are starting to
You
quit. I
should.
just mean like they should, but they don't. So
Yep.
unless they can fire
Yep.
somebody or not hire somebody, and this is my callous view of the world, but I mean, it's in business, it's typically there's values on the wall, and then there's the values in the boardroom, and the values in the boardroom are typically much different than when I started this tech company, and the tech folks were telling me we need core values. I was like, what the hell? Like, why would we need that? They're on every hospital's wall. But when you work in the hospital, you never feel those things, right? That's marketing for patients, right?
We need to baptize you in us. You need to come hang out with us teleos people, because it shouldn't be what you're describing.
Yeah,
I know
I
what
get it. It should be, but like my experience in hospitals all over the place was it's for marketing for patients, and it doesn't actually apply. But in the tech world, it
Yep.
actually does, right? It's how we hire and fire. It's how every quarter when we analyze people, let's get it, want it, capacity to do it, and then our core values, and you get a good, bad, or needs improvement. So I get it now. I get it now, but I don't even know where that came from in this answer. But it was kind of just some of the values don't.
Well, I think where you're going is that the technology was taking us away from things that we said were important, and it feels like you're describing that there's a season coming that's going to give us the opportunity that those two can be reconciled.
Yep.
I'm recording a show that's kind of like, here's what's coming. It's a really good 360-degree analysis of the environment. And then it's an acronym. My wife actually helped me last year. Like, here's what you got to do. Grow, sow, flow, and know. And then this year we're adding something, R&D. And so, but the flow is something I don't hear a lot of people talking about. But when you create friction with your customer, if you and I were just starting, like for instance, I'll pick on, I won't say their name, but they lease out office space, like hoteling office space. I've never encountered a company that I swear I was working more at their success than mine. The friction was awful, so much so I'm like, was beside myself. I'm like, how do these people stay in business? So it's an example of what I mean by friction. But then also friction, and then I actually start asking the person on the phone, and she's like, you just don't understand what it's like to work here. So then she shares with me all the friction her employer was creating with her, which then was creating friction with me as the customer. So everywhere those friction points are opportunities for improvement, which is the flow. How can you make it flow much better? And you're giving me hope that we may finally have technology that can enhance that as opposed to increase the flipping
the
friction.
Simple sentence, like one of them that we have on a lot of our marketing materials, but internal stuff, is really automate the work you hate, right? I mean, that should be when you're looking at what to automate. That's your lowest hanging fruit, because that's where your culture problems are coming from in the first place, right? So that's the one you get less friction on, right? When you start automating things people love, now, I mean, it might make sense financially, but you start to get more friction, right? If it's like, hey, you don't need to talk to the patient anymore, like, hold on, that's, unless some don't like that, right? But most providers kind of like seeing the patient. You might get more friction than just, hey, you don't need to click all the vital signs anymore. I'm just making up examples.
But there's a bunch of work, right, to be eliminated. The work that we don't like is probably where most of the application opportunity is. It would have to get really advanced when you start to eliminate work that you do like, would be my guess.
It's just going to depend on the exact example, right? I mean, it's what you automate really has little to do with whether you like it or don't like it. It's just what's the tech capable of doing. And then second is, will people buy into it? But like if the tech can't do it anyhow, then like, I mean, it can't do it. So there's not a robot to do a colonoscopy. It just can't do it. So whether you like that one or not, it can't do it. So like you can't automate that one. And that's why like the sign behind my head is, help the humans is our logo. It's that, freeing people to do more of the work that they enjoy is the goal. Now, it may mean there's too many people doing a job because 80% of their time is button clicking. So if you eliminate the button clicking, then you might not need all those people, or they can spend more time, right? With their work they're doing so, there's a trade-off. The Industrial Revolution, people quit stamping every machine press, right? And now, they just manage the machines doing the stamping press. And I was at Sierra Nevada up in Asheville the other day, and walking through, I took a video of the assembly line, doing beer bottles. And I'm thinking like, does anyone miss that there's not 50 people sticking labels on beer bottles? I mean, is that something that we really are sad
Right.
that doesn't happen anymore? And so there'll be a transition phase as we realize a lot of the work we were doing was actually computer work to begin with. There'll be some time, but then what's left will end up, every revolution like this ends up with people in a better financial position, historically speaking. Right? Maybe this one's different, but typically history repeats itself. Every historical transition, yeah, that's
or
right.
at least it rhymes.
It's still fun to say, but yeah, people have always historically ended up better off financially whenever you've been able to automate, low level work. So it should be the same. And to your art and science question, clearly the art of healthcare is that tactful empathy, that emotional knowing when to say. It's the EQ part, not the IQ part. And my hope, and I might be just an optimistic thinker here, but my hope is that that's what ends up being left for healthcare, right? And that the IQ part is the part that we continually whittle away at that is not the most important part of healthcare.
Yep. That's well said. And my mentor, Dr. Lee Thayer, who you've heard me talk about quite often, Jack, he said, if what you do can be replaced by a robot, it should, because you should do your work with such virtuosity, which is usually reserved for, think of a violinist or a inventor who makes just incredible wines. You do your work in such a way that part can't be replaced by a robot. And that was actually one of the very last blogs he wrote. And I think it was said, "The robots are coming, oh my." I think I used that title for you and I last year. So, Jack, any final thoughts? This has been great. Always thought-provoking.
It's a great thing to say, but you never hear someone saying that whose job is actually at risk. I mean, if you think of who you've heard say that, I mean, I've never heard a truck driver say, if this truck can drive itself, it should. I mean, you have to, with the context of who's saying it. And again, I say it too, so I'm not judging other people. I'm just saying that it's interesting. Final thought, I'd say on ChatGPT stuff, what gives me so much hope about this is I hate writing letters. I hate writing long things. I like 3 bullets, right? And I want to be done. And I think the beauty, going back to the most human in conversation and stuff, is that we're getting closer to the point, for better or worse. Okay, so there's going to be some worse sides of this, but where our emails, our conversations are going to have less, "Hey, Chris, it's great to see you again. Hope the kids are good. How was that vacation?" Take out all the fluff, right? And it'll just be, podcast, Monday at 4, be there 15 minutes early. Here are 5 questions, right? And that's it. Because otherwise I'm going to take what you put in your long form, put it in there and say, what do I need to know? And it's going to give me your bullets that you started with, because you put your bullets in there when it wrote the long thing. So I think you start to get to a more efficient communication system and style when the opening and closing, just like a game of chess, can be automated. You just stick to the meat, right? You stick to the middle. And that gives people like me hope, who strive for efficiency in everything I do. So I could play the game with people who want long form. I can stick it in there and say, make this 3 pages, and then they're happy. Or I could take their 3 pages and stick it in there and make it 5 bullets, and then I'm happy. So I think it's fun. It's uncovering what really is human and what are the commonalities in human language, because that's why it can write stories well. It's because every story follows a script, right? So anyway, it's the most. This past 3 months to me have been the most exciting time to be alive, just because you finally crossed a threshold. So now it's off to the races.
Wow. All right, Jack. Well, I think that's a great place to end. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And for our listeners, I'll leave you with a quote that I alluded to earlier. Jack picked it out. There are decades when nothing happens, and then there's weeks where decades happen. That's by Vladimir Lenin. Thanks for listening to TCN Talks.